They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Best Day Ever. We're on episode number 10, so we're 2 weeks deep into the show and just excited to be bringing episode 10 to you guys. We've got a lot to cover today, so we're going to be talking about what's going on with the Emergencies Act Inquiry here in Canada. We're going to touch base on a couple WTF stories as well. Adam's got a couple stories for us, and before we get into all that, Adam, how are you doing?
Yeah, doing really well today, and I figure I'd start you guys off with my little update. And yesterday, I was down a couple hours on my screen time usage following the sort of removing a bunch of those notifications. I haven't checked. I think it might take a minute for it to really recalculate all of your notification data. But I got way less notifications and therefore checked my phone less often, and you know how that goes. So spent a lot less time on, what I would consider just unnecessary screen time usage, which is awesome if you're trying to be productive. So really excited about that update.
Nice. That's awesome. And actually, this is kind of tangential as well, but just on kind of updates with me. Not necessarily any progress on getting on better sleep schedule, even though you've given us all the information to do so. But previously on our daily Twitter space that we do, DGen Friends Daily, you brought up an old YouTube video of mine that I'd honestly you don't completely forget about it, but you kind of forget about it, right? And it was, I think, the third installment of the Dark Side of Financial Independence, and those were really videos that were just kind of I guess online blogs or video diaries would probably be a good describer of it. This one from 2018, and I couldn't help but actually start watching and listening to it while we were in our Twitter space, and man, it just honestly it blew me away. There's times when I watch old YouTube videos of myself, and I have such a mixed bag of emotions where I'm like, man, I was actually kind of clever back then. I was kind of, well spoken and all these different things. And then I listen, to the content and the themes of the subject matter. I'm like, wow, I feel like I've changed a lot over the last 4 years, and yet I also feel exactly the same. And I don't know if you've ever done journals before, Adam, but I used to do written journals. And back in 2016, 17, and 18, I'd sometimes come across a journal that was, again, 4 or 5 years old, read it. And it's fascinating to me, at least for myself and my personal journey, how often I'm touching upon reoccurring themes and how often I'm struggling against the same sort of meta patterns. And I'm able to make progress in certain ways, but at the same time, there's a lot of things where, I find myself not repeating history, but certainly repeating certain patterns. And it was just, anyways, fascinating. I'm really glad you brought it up on that space because it made my day. And I look forward to maybe doing a deep dive on a couple other video journals from 2016 and 2017. And I suspect that I'm going to have a similar sort of emotion where it's you know what? Sometimes you feel like you really drift or evolve as a person, and yet at the same time there's a certain core aspect to us that I think for a lot of us stays as a consistent touchstone or north star that guides us throughout the journey of life. So anyways, just kind of an interesting observation there. But if you don't have anything else to say, I'll jump into a couple of quick updates. We'll get into the WTF story and then the meat of our stories here.
I guess just one insight is countless high performers have said journaling is a very important thing to do, and I've just never taken the time. The only time I even flirted with it was this really neat book. I don't know, probably like available for sale at like a Chapters or something like that, or Indigo, I think it's called now. But it was called 365 questions, and you essentially just like write down a question every day. But it was like 5 years in one little, very small, concise book. And man, flipping back through that, because it'll ask you the same question, right, a year later, and then you flip back to, what was I thinking about this a year ago or 5 years ago, and man, that was a powerful book, because it was at a time too where I was going through a very like hardcore growth phase, and so just looking at some of my challenges or problems and how they changed over the years was definitely insightful, and a great reminder too about like where we started and where we're at and where we're trying to go. So I think that's something we could do, right, in order to be 1%
Yeah, I
better.
like
I
the
think would
idea
help.
of like every year asking yourself the same questions and just seeing, the similar patterns as well as how your thought process evolves, because it's just so bizarre to me how I can feel like such a different person and yet still see such a core resemblance to like that previous version of myself. So yeah, highly recommend people journal, whether that's, video journaling, whether that's just written journaling, any sort of journaling, I think really allows us to explore and calcify certain thoughts that we otherwise probably just wouldn't explore if we weren't given the prompt. So yeah, I'm actually going to use that as my daily recommendation. There is just get started journaling. But the first quick story I wanted to do as like a touch in or an update with you guys is in regards to affordability here in Canada. This one is courtesy of CTV News. Average rent in Canada exceeds $2,000 per month, according to this report. Now, the headline here is a little bit misleading for a couple reasons. One, this is in regards to new listings for rentals, as well as this is specific to houses. So again, a few things to unpack there, but it is still a sign that rents are trending up. This particular metric, if we're looking September over September, it's gone up 15.4% over the last year, that's a wild annual increase, something that I don't think you're going to see accurately represented through the CPI data that we're currently seeing, even though CPI data is still dramatically increasing as well. So just wanted to kind of share that. Not too much to build upon, but if you guys are curious, go down that rabbit hole. One thing I guess that did jump out to me was Nova Scotia. The average house rents apparently for $2,453. Or actually, sorry, this one was across all property types. So that's even apartments, which that seems wild to me. I don't know if there's a housing crisis going on in Nova Scotia or what the deal is there, but I would have not bet that it would be nearly that high. And the fact that it's technically $2 above Ontario's average rent is bizarre, I think, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, even just from a GDP perspective, right? Like they're just simply not going to have as much economy as Ontario would have. And I think that's I don't think I'm stepping on any toes there. I think that would be well accepted. And I was actually recently in Nova Scotia and just talking anecdotally to some locals, and they were absolutely talking about this. I mean, I think what has happened in recent years is we have actually seen a lot of people moving from Ontario to Nova Scotia, driving up the price through increased demand. And then, of course, bringing with them the capital as they liquidate something in Ontario that at the time would have been worth more, taking it to a market that was worth less, and then increasing the demand, which of course raises prices for everything. So definitely surprising though. Of course, I mean, the same type of employment is not available in Nova Scotia that's available in Ontario. It's just a fact. So definitely interesting to think about.
And one other point here just to make is, and that was like a 35% increase in Nova Scotia, which is just like absurd, a 35% increase year over year. Saskatchewan was $1,069. So like if you're looking for real affordability for a really lower cost of living, like Saskatchewan appears to be where it's at. I'm not surprised to see that it's significantly lower than like in Ontario or BC. But, when I'm thinking of like Nova Scotia versus Saskatchewan, I don't believe Nova Scotia deserves to be 2.5 times higher than what you're going to see in Nova Scotia. Yeah, than in Saskatchewan. Anyways, just wild. But let's get into a couple wild WTF stories. This first one is in regards to culture jamming. So we talked about previously. Did you see this, Adam?
I did see this. It was awesome.
So this is, a quick little update in regards to culture jamming. A reporter from the Rebel News attended a school board meeting in the it's Trafalgar Oakville School District or whatever it's called. We covered it previously, right, when I did my deep dive on our first Wednesday show about culture jamming, about the teacher that was wearing giant prosthetic breasts and apparently identifying like a biological male identifying as female. So the news reporter essentially dressed up identical to how the teacher represents themselves. And, I think that this is a decent form of culture jamming. I guess if I was to critique it in any way, the only thing I would add is I almost kind of like, I get what they're doing here is just like an apples to apples comparison. And I definitely respect that. But if I was trying to view this through the lens of, say, how an Alex Stein, who again, I think he's like one of the best, if not the best current culture jammer out there. I feel like you kind of need to sometimes zig when culture's zagging. And so for me, like, I think that another interesting approach to flip things on the head, because this almost feels just like a little bit too much on the nose, in my opinion, would be like a giant prosthetic penis that you would have under your pants, where it essentially look like you have a third leg. Wear very tight fitting pants, stretchy pants, you're probably going to need those. But like female jogging pants or something like that would work perfectly to really just, just be absurd with it. But again, I think this is interesting. I do think that you get diminishing returns with culture jamming. So you do constantly need to be willing to reinvent and push the boundaries. So, if tomorrow 100 different school districts had people dress up this way and show up, I don't think it would necessarily make the same impact as the time the first person does it. So anyone that's looking to get into culture jamming, I just want to encourage you, consistently think outside the box. Take whatever principle that you're taking a position against and take it to its most logical extreme conclusion. I think that's one of the simple like shorthands in regards to trying to become an effective culture jammer.
Yeah, a great perspective there, Matt. And in fact, the original story, not the reporter, but the original shop teacher story actually made it onto Joe Rogan's discussion the other day.
Oh,
and
interesting.
They were talking about he at least stated that him and others were very convinced that it was an act of culture jamming that was occurring. And I think the jury's a little bit out on this, but if it is, I mean, what a brilliant strategy from the teacher's perspective. And I do agree with you with this reporter. There's probably a more interesting way to do what he has accomplished here, but I mean, it's still interesting.
The only thing I'll say about it being like a brilliant like performance or strategy from the teacher, I don't disagree with the sentiment, but at the same time, I do think that it needs to be viewed through the context of the fact that like the children are kind of pawns in this battle, right?
Yes.
If this is a culture jamming thing, I don't love the fact that you're using students as pawns. Where even, for example, like this reporter showing up to a school board meeting, that's going to be essentially all adults at the school board meeting. So again, there's a slight different approach here. So like, if there's a kindergarten teacher listening to this right now and you want a culture jam, respect, but please don't show up with giant prosthetic breasts to confuse your students, because again, I think that there is different approaches that could be undertaken here.
A follow-up to that story too, like one of the negatives that actually was an outcome of this is like the school didn't actually respond with like being like, oh no, like you can't do that. In fact, I think what ended up happening was they sort of just like essentially changed the dress code so that he could still wear prosthetics, but less large ones. And so like, this is one of those weird, like kind of unintended consequences if it was an attempt at culture jamming, because like that doesn't actually give us any provision. Like that doesn't help, right? Like that's not the point. If that was the desired outcome to like, bring real attention to how ridiculous this is. Although it is ridiculous too, to be like, well, yeah, you can do it, just not with that size. And you're like, well, what size is appropriate? Who gets to measure that? And like, at what point does it become a excellent environment for students to learn in? Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely agree with all that. And so I've got one other kind of WTF story I want to explore with you guys. Just a little FYI here, Adam, because I'm obsessed with Rumble. I'm not sure if we're streaming to Rumble right now, so you might want to check that. But this is from the Toronto Star. It was supposed to be a safe, affordable home for Ontarians with nowhere else to go, but inside it was horrifying. And so Some of these photos are horrifying. Adam and I have been through a lot of terrible houses, right? That's a big aspect of being a real estate investor, is finding underutilized assets and bringing it up to its highest, most efficient use. I want to share with you guys some of the photos here. What's particularly interesting is this hits extra home because it's in St. Thomas, so very close to where I used to invest, close to where Adam invests currently, and still wholesales real estate and stuff like that. And I guess the biggest point I want to make here is it's so frustrating because, for example, like I had rental properties in London, and there's one in particular that just drives me crazy, where I was actually the occupant of the apartment, and I literally had a City of London building inspector go and measure every stair in the apartment just to try and get me on the fact that this century home didn't fit existing building standards. And there was all kinds of back and forth and arguments with the city. It was so frustrating. They ended up putting like a charge on the property because of it. It like wild. And understand that like my property perfectly suitable to live in. I was literally living in the property, and yet they were coming after me. And yet somehow, like these crazy slumlords are able to operate without any sort of like risk, right? They're operating with impunity. It feels like at times, and like first things first. This is a like home for people that have different challenges integrating successfully into society, but at the same time, they're capable enough that they don't necessarily need to be like in a hospital or things like that. Um, the fact that 26 people were living here, I find particularly astounding because I've seen properties like this, but usually it's going to be in a much like smaller capacity, right? Like it's a single family house or a duplex, and the tenants have like essentially done it to themselves to a certain extent. Again, the landlord should have stepped in and negated things. I don't know. This may be actually the moldiest ceiling I've ever seen. I've definitely seen piles of junk like this. The fact that I think this is a dead
Oh,
mouse.
Jesus. I thought, Matt, I literally thought that was wallpaper.
No, so this is mold. So I believe this is the worst mold I've
Holy
ever
shit.
seen on a ceiling. But like sadly, I have seen shit like this before. Again, with people that have like issues fully integrating into society, oftentimes you'll find them predisposed to hoarding, and that's sometimes how you end up with these piles of garbage and weird things. But anyways, just wanted to highlight it because it is wild. This seems to have been an ongoing issue, and one of the biggest factors here is the fact that this landlord was also providing meals, right? And so they found like pallets of bread that mice had got into and shit like that. You can see here they're kind of showing that like this bread's been tampered with by mice. There was a freezer that had been unplugged for over a month that was storing food and things like that. Again, like terrible and very unfortunate. And I just kind of want to highlight it as a WTF story because I don't understand. I know so many small landlords that are constantly being attacked by the city for like what truly is nothing burgers, and yet somehow like these larger scale operators seem to be able to operate for extended periods of time without any serious consequences. Now the article does, like, this is a very thorough article, it does highlight some of the fines and different judgments against the landlords, but again it seems to not really impact the landlords where they continue to operate, they continue to just set up new companies and things like that. Just wanted to highlight it because it was wild. Again, some of the photos are less damning than others, but that one of mold, it's just like is completely like shocking to me, in my humble opinion. So don't know if you have any hot takes here, Adam, but just kind of wanted to highlight this because this felt like a perfect WTF story.
Yeah, that's absolutely a WTF story. And like I've actually experienced it myself. And I pulled up a video, if we care to watch it, of a property that I actually bought and then instantly ran into so many problems with the city when I was doing my absolute best, putting like serious resources into this building. It was easily the worst building on the block. And we were trying to restore this building that was obviously, in significant disrepair. And the building I bought this the person I bought this building off of obviously wasn't maintaining it very well. And I was trying to pour in like this is after several bins of garbage being taken out of here, but I was trying to put my blood, sweat, tears, capital into this building, and the City of London was very, very, very difficult to me and did almost anything that they could to prevent me from making serious progress with any respectable pace. Because obviously taking on something like this, one thing people don't consider is the bank's not going to finance that, right? And so you have to take on expensive money to try and do these repairs. And honestly, it's a net positive for everybody involved when this type of project happens. And so it is disturbing to think that, like, just out of sheer bureaucratic nonsense, that they want to prevent things like that from being improved. So, that's a very real story. And the video I just showed you is literally a building that I own. So, I can personally say this is a real thing, right? It's not just they found one instance, one landlord, one example in a city nearby. Like, no, that was London, Ontario. So WTF, guys.
Yeah, completely agree with it. I'm pretty sure Rumble's trolling you, Adam, because it's
Are you?
definitely not live there. Again,
Oh.
we'll roll with the punches regardless. If you can find it on Rumble, I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I'm pretty thorough with my research here. So jumping over to the first main story of the day, I really just want to touch in with the Emergencies Act Inquiry that's currently going on here in Canada. Again, reminder for anyone that's forgotten what we're talking about, this all relates to the Freedom Trucker Convoy protest, right? February 14th, the Canadian government, at the behest of Justin Trudeau, enacted the Emergencies Act. And, it caused a lot of, honestly, I think it caused a severe loss in trust in our institutions and our government in particular, because we saw things like, grandmas being trampled by horses. We saw Canadians having their bank accounts frozen for various reasons associated with their involvement with the Freedom Trucker Convoy protest. And then we saw a lot of people pointing the finger without really any definitive proof. And a lot of the initial stories and facts and justifications that came up in Parliament during their desire, or like their push to enact the Emergencies Act, we ended up seeing proven untrue, right? So the first story here, this is from the Western Standard. Obviously, the Western Standard usually is going to take pot shots at the Liberals and Justin Trudeau, and this article is no different. With the Emergencies Act inquiry, the jig is up for Justin Trudeau. So a couple points I wanted to highlight here from the article. We will soon know Trudeau was very well acquainted with the facts of the Freedom Convoy, but he chose to assiduously ignore them and distort reality to his own political ends. The trio of Trudeau, Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson, and even Ontario Conservative Premier Doug Ford painted the Freedom Convoy as a bunch of racist, misogynist, domestic terrorists who danced on the tomb of the unknown soldier. One by one, all of these lies have come down in ruins as police and other authorities quietly admitted the convoy protesters in Ottawa had no guns, desecrated no monuments, and set no buildings on fire. Now we know the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS, did not view the protesters as Nazis or far-right extremists, but is no different than other crowds opposing vaccine mandates. A CSIS memo described those waving offensive flags as only being a very small portion of the crowd. And so this is from a CSIS memo here. The memo does not specifically describe any protester carrying a bona fide Nazi flag, but says some protesters added a swastika to their flag, not necessarily to self-identify as Nazis, but to imply the Prime Minister and federal government are acting like Nazis by imposing public health mandates. And the reason I want to highlight this one is back when I was doing the Daily Maple Pill, this frustrated me so much because we had mainstream media saying that this was a sign that these people were Nazis. And it was literally the exact opposite. They were calling out the tyrannical fascist tendencies of Justin Trudeau of just wanting to shout down any opponent and essentially freeze their bank accounts and frame them constantly with these straw man arguments that they were misogynist, that they were racist, that they had unacceptable views, that they were anti-vaccine, right? That they didn't trust the science, all the different things, when in fact, what the crux of the argument here was, and what actually drove this initial protest, and why so many truckers were involved with this protest, was because of mandates that were being implemented by the Canadian government. Now, one of the main critiques, if you guys remember, that was pushed back by individuals that were more reasonable in their critiques of the Freedom Trucker Convoy protest was the fact that the U.S. had implemented similar measures. But if you guys remember from the Maple Pill, my continuous statement and position was, hey, this is unacceptable regardless of what other governments are doing. Like, I don't care if Iran is killing women. That doesn't justify the Canadian government wanting to kill women. And again, it's really important to understand the facts around this case, because I really want to believe that this inquiry is going to be unpartisan, unbiased, and just focus on getting down to the real facts of how this all played out. I am suspicious, though. I am nervous that that's not going to be the case. A couple more points from the article. The service is, and this is CSIS again, the service is unaware of the presence of ideologically motivated extremist groups at this weekend's protest. The memo states freedom of expression is constitutionally protected in Canada, or at least it was. If Trudeau read the memo and ignored it, he's guilty of deliberately ignoring his own intelligence and putting his political objectives above facts. If he failed to consult his own intelligence agency or to read the memo, he is guilty of incompetence and gross negligence. Perhaps he was too busy serenading his fans at a piano bar that allowed him to sing maskless. So, again, obviously the Western Standard, they're usually going to be against Trudeau and the Liberals, but the points I've made here and highlighted in the article, like, these are just kind of facts. And one of the big things that is a concern about this query, if you guys haven't, spent much time looking into it, and I understand, and honestly, I think people are just tired at this moment in time where we're like, yeah, we know the government's a bunch of liars. What the hell are we going to do about it? But understand that the judge that's actually overseeing this, right, and this is from Rebel News here, he's been a longtime Liberal supporter. He's been involved in Liberal campaigns in the past, and he's donated to the Liberal Party. Now, I truly want to believe that the judge can be impartial in these things. At the same time, I kind of feel like it would have been wise for the Liberals, if they're truly trying to do everything above board, to have this judge recuse himself and bring in a judge that truly hasn't supported the Liberals in the past, that can truly peer unpartisan in nature in regards to this. The last little thing I want to highlight here was, if you guys haven't checked it out, Toronto Star will be live tweeting everything going on with the Emergencies Act. Now, the Toronto Star, they're going to usually take the exact opposite position of the Western Standard. So again, depending upon your political bent, you may find yourself drawn more towards one versus the other. Also, the Counter Signal is doing a good job of really highlighting what's going on and breaking things down. So I encourage you just to check them out as an additional source of information. But enough of my monologue. What are your thoughts here, Adam?
Yeah, I'm with you on the Nazi flag thing. Like, as soon as I saw it, I 100% interpreted that as a statement against the Trudeau government and not as a pro-Nazism statement. And I was a little bit shocked that the media and Trudeau and his whole government ran with the fact that, like, oh, that means that there are Nazis out there. Like, if you spent a single second on the ground, live, in person, at any of these demonstrations, it was the most Canadian, most loving, most caring, most charitable experience that I've ever been to as a Canadian. And so I just found that to be criminal. And I'm also very astonished, Matt, that, like, I can't even buy a property or sell a contract without signing acknowledgments if my customer, buyer, or anybody has ever worked with my lawyer before. And so to have a judge that's been supporting the political party that is supposed to be being analyzed here and perhaps punished here, like, that to me seems out of line. Although I think, to kind of make a steelman argument there, like, who is going to be unbiased, I actually don't know, because if you found another judge that had actively supported other parties, I could say the same thing could happen there in terms of a bias. But I don't know if anybody truly can be impartial, is my issue. Like, how do you truly be impartial if it is in line with your beliefs, right? So I'm not sure about that stuff, but I really do hope that we get to the bottom of this. I really do hope that we see some sort of consequences for what was done here, because if we don't, I don't even think that what happened over the COVID pandemic and these mandates in the Emergency Act as it was used this time was even that bad when we compare it to what could happen in the future, right? If we see, like, even more draconian measures or more punishments, or the usability or easeability of using things like freezing bank accounts and manipulating freedom of mobility, like, if that becomes commonplace, I think that this goes somewhere really dark. And so I really hope that the committee in charge of looking at this will understand that this is a slippery slope that we're only seeing the top of. So
Certainly, when it comes to governments implementing extreme measures, right? It's very rare that they go full blown day one when they implement it, right? It often is that slow sliding descent into tyranny. The next story here I want to jump into, and this is like this story in and of itself, I don't think is that important, but it's a reoccurring theme that I regularly see playing out here right now. So if you guys have been kind of oblivious to what's going on with climate protesters, a common thing now, right, seems to be them gluing themselves to different places and often trying to desecrate, significant pieces of art. So the most recent example of this, and this is courtesy of the Toronto Sun, climate protesters throw soup on Van Gogh's sunflowers. And I honestly just want to use this as an opportunity to explore this theme of these protesters trying to desecrate art. And, I think by no coincidence, it's usually, really well respected Western artists that they're desecrating the art of. Now, a quick note here is this isn't the first time people have tried to ruin famous art. So, again, all these galleries and museums, like they're prepared for this. They're usually either like glazed or they're behind glass or whatever. So, this is all really about the symbolism, in my opinion, versus like the results. And one thing I just find curious, to say the least, about this type of protest is it really just seems to be about the symbolism, because you're not really destroying the art. You gluing yourself to a wall doesn't really impact things. And if it wasn't for the fact that mainstream media seems to cover these stories as if they're extremely important, and I get the irony here of me complaining about mainstream media covering these stories while I'm literally covering it, but I hope there's a nuance here that you guys can pick up on. Like, I truly don't get how this is going to move people into your ideology, right? Like, I actually suspect that there's a lot of like, and maybe this is just me stereotyping, but I assume there's a lot of snooty art lovers out there that would actually probably be in alignment with a lot of the green movement. But you going and trying to wreck their art and wreck their museums, I feel like it's literally just going to isolate yourself more. And yet I also don't think that like it makes any lasting impact. Like, some dude's going to come up with a rag, wipe off the Campbell soup here, and within half an hour, people are going to be able to come back into this museum. I, I think that what we're actually seeing play out here is something completely different. These individuals, right? They're often very young. I think that they've decided that their identity, whether because they've been brainwashed by climate alarmists, whether it's because they're just looking for meaning, right? And again, I think when you see people, especially young people, tend towards extremism, it's simply because they're lost, right? They feel untethered and they're looking for some sort of framework that they can buy into to make sense of the world. So that's why so many young people are prone to joining cults, is why they're so likely to be radicalized, right? Whether we're talking about Islam or other religions or things of that nature, it's playing out here exactly the same way in regards to these green movements or these climate protests. So I guess any thoughts there, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, this is just pure ignorance, right? I mean, if you understood what oil actually does in our economy and what it does globally and for our infrastructure, and even the green technologies that are being proposed by some of these climate alarmists, like, you would understand very quickly that you can't just stop oil. It's required. You must have it to make any of these technologies that they talk about. Whether that's extracting precious metals out of the earth, or whether that's building the turbines required to capture wind energy, or build the dams that are going to capture your hydroelectric energy. And it's just, you just can't stop oil. And when I first saw this, I was like, oh, look, a tribute to Andy Warhol. It's throwing Campbell's soup. It's kind of poetic. But the reality is here that these two kids have just ruined their lives. They will absolutely be.
So? Like,
yes,
I honestly
yes.
don't think that they have.
I
don't think there'll be significant consequences.
Matt, okay. Somebody I know when they were, I think, 18, 19, stole a bike and was arrested for stealing a bike.
Well, just to be clear, I think that's way different, to be honest. Like, I think that the judicial system will treat these climate protesters differently than a different, like any other type of criminal.
Perhaps, but they're arrested right now for criminal damage and aggravated trespassing. So I don't know. Because anyways, this guy who stole a bike when he was 19, he's now probably 45. He still can't enter the United States of America. It still shows up on a
Has he
criminal
applied
record.
for a pardon though? Because like
You easily could,
yeah,
but
because
that
like
would
that's one of the things where like I've got a person in my family as well that did some stupid stuff when they were young, and for whatever reason, he refuses to apply for a pardon out of principle versus like whatever. I honestly think that this will turn into a nothing burger for these kids. I could be wrong, but I just I really think that a judge isn't going to look at them the same way as a different type of criminal. Again, that maybe is just my personal bias here, but I guess the big thing here is I don't like other than just wearing the t-shirt that says, just stop oil, which as you said is a very impractical position, right? And this idea that we can just move from a high dense form of energy to a lower dense form of energy without any significant consequences to our global economy is honestly so naive that it's embarrassing, right? Like it feels like these kids watched a couple YouTube videos or listened to Greta Thunberg a couple times and decided to build an entire identity around I'm going to be like Greta. But even like we've literally seen Greta even coming out being like, hey, nuclear is not actually all that bad, because it turns out we do need energy.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally how the world goes around, and these arguments are absurd. Of course, I think we should also be leaning more on some of the new nuclear technology rather than trying to explore all this stuff that doesn't really work. Like, here's a great way to look at it. If the government needs to sponsor all of the cost for it to be sustainable, it's not sustainable. Okay, that's just everybody paying into it. That's communism or socialism, and it doesn't really work very well. But moving right along into our next story here, we've got a story here. And Matt, I do appreciate when I share my screen because I want audio that I'll have to stop sharing in order for you to comment. So I'll just let you know when I'm done and I'll stop. But our next story here is from Zero Hedge. And it is Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan. So this is the CEO of JP Morgan, essentially just absolutely ragging on Biden. And what he's electing for is for America to really move over and start producing oil. So kind of a stark contrast from the previous story we just heard. Jamie Dimon, this guy from JP Morgan, is saying, like, what the hell are we doing to maintain our standing and the future of the world by continuing to purchase oil and gas from international markets when we have so much of it ourselves here. And then he goes on to comment too about the economy and why he thinks Joe Biden is not taking this seriously. And part of this discussion, I don't believe it's in this, we're going to share the clip, but I don't believe he says it in here. But one of the things he talks about is that, and he this is a direct quote. He says, when it comes to ESG, which is, social scores, investors don't give a shit. Okay. Warning not to, seed governments and to do gooder kids on a committee. And essentially his messaging here is like, listen, we're not trying to implement the next social change. We're trying to survive this economic collapse that's going on right now. And Joe Biden and his government are not taking it seriously. So I'll play the clip so you guys can actually just hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
People thought it's stickier because of wages and a whole bunch of stuff. Higher rates. If you go back a while ago, people expected 3 would be the top. Now it's 4. They may, 4 to 4.5 may be the number. It may have to go higher. My gut tells me higher. And there's no example we have inflation coming down very rapidly over a 3 or 4 year period, down to 2%. And then, of course, this QT. We've never had QT before. It's a dramatic change in the flow of funds around the world. Central banks selling, governments are selling, foreign exchange matters are selling, banks don't have to buy anymore. And so it's just kind of an unknown quality there. And then the war, which I put in the category as a major, we really don't know the full effect, how it's going to end, what's going to happen. Oil is fragile, oil prices are fragile, supply is fragile, supply chains in oil and gas and food are fragile. It's bad. So I look at that as those things are huge turbulence, which are kind of right in front of us or in the middle of it today. And that could easily cause a recession. My comment about the stock market was, I don't know if it's going to be a soft landing. I don't think so, but it might. Mild recession or tough recession. My point, in the tough recession, you would expect the market on another 20 or 30%. I'm not going to give odds across those three things, but for all of us who have to worry about risk, of course you should plan for those things. As a bank, my job is to serve my client regardless of those outcomes, which is what I mostly worry about. The silver lining is that the Western world maybe because of Ukraine, that the Western world, meaning America, Europe, Japan, Korea, Philippines, Australia, get its act together and understand how serious, if we want to defend freedom, democracy, freedom of rights, freedom of speech, free enterprise for the next 100 years, we have got to get this right. And this, it seems like we're getting together. That's the part I like.
Okay, so that's the CEO of JP Morgan telling you essentially that a direct quote inside that little clip was oil, gas, and food supply chains are extremely fragile and vulnerable to the types of conflict that we're seeing right now and the types of inflation and economic reckoning that's on the horizon. And he also just talked about the possibility of another 20 to 30% correction in the stock market. So very interesting. This is a clip in a news article that came out, I believe, actually this morning. This was posted this morning. Yep. And so, Matt, any thoughts on Jamie's comments here?
Yeah, it definitely is refreshing that we're starting to see some of the large financial institutions push back, at least to a certain degree, against the prevailing narrative of, we have to essentially avoid or skew everything fossil fuels oriented. I guess one story that didn't make it into our weekly roundup that I'll maybe quickly share here with you guys, because I honestly believe that the vast majority of corporations that are coming out green, that are leaning into ESG scores and things of that nature, they're not doing it because they actually believe it makes for better business. They're doing it because they believe it makes for better marketing. This is courtesy of Spencer Fernando. RBC is facing an investigation from the Canadian Competition Bureau over allegations that their climate action claims have been deceptive. So Canada's largest commercial bank is facing an investigation by the Competition Bureau of Canada over allegedly deceptive advertising related to its climate action, the federal watchdog confirmed on Tuesday. A September 29th letter from the federal watchdog agency and obtained by Yahoo Finance Canada, Royal Bank of Canada is under investigation related to certain marketing practices at the bank. The letter is addressed to lawyers at EcoJustice, a nonprofit environmental law organization that previously filed a complaint with the Bureau. EcoJustice lawyer Matt Hall says RBC's ongoing dealings in the oil and gas industry are at odds with its stated climate strategy. So RBC has claimed that it will achieve net zero in its lending and investments by 2050 and will come out with targets and plans over the next 2 years. He said in an emailed statement, this commitment is undermined by RBC's continued financing of fossil fuels and its failure to account for the bulk of emissions from fossil fuel companies that it finances. According to EcoJustice, RBC's financing of fossil fuels companies in 2021 topped $34.4 billion in loans and underwriting, include $50.4 billion in investments. In October of that year, RBC became a member of the UN-backed Net Zero Banking Alliance, a commitment to align lending and investment practices with achieving net zero emissions by 2050. You see, RBC didn't really want to do anything. They want to say the magic phrases and then keep on investing and profiting. And I think that's what's so, again, frustrating about just modern society these days is everyone saying what they think people want to hear while not actually caring about the consequences or implementing it, right? Like, it'd be one thing if RBC really did believe in all this and they'd, put their teams of economists on it and studied it. And no, they're doing this because they think it's politically expedient, right? They believe that this will put them on the right side of Justin Trudeau and a lot of climate alarmists and climate protesters. And so they're just trying to take the path of least resistance here. But that's not how you build a functioning society whatsoever, right? That's not how you build a better future, is by just lip reading along to whatever narrative they want to put in front of you while still doing the exact opposite. And just this disingenuousness drives me crazy, honestly.
Yeah, me too. And I do wonder what will happen in if my prediction that everybody around the world is going to swing hard right after the last couple of years and go to a far more conservative or right wing political scene. And I wonder if this type of activity will continue at the same pace and velocity that it is right now. But certainly, like, greenwashing has been around for the last few years, and it doesn't seem productive to me. Al in the comments actually just mentioned, like, he doesn't really blame them because this is perhaps a profitable opportunity to capture these customers that are diehards for this type of messaging. And I don't know. I don't know if I like that, but it is definitely a thing. I mean, if they could capture more market share, or perhaps there's segments of clients that they never had access to that are proponents of this type of greenwashing, or consumers of this, and that's why they're doing it. I guess you got to do what you got to do, but I don't think it makes you feel good at the end of the day if they're doing absolutely nothing and just saying that that's what they stand for. But
Well, like I'll push back on that you got to do what you got to do, because that's how we find ourselves in these positions, right?
yeah,
Is people constantly willing to take the path of least resistance here. So I actually I do point fault at RBC. I do point fault at everyone else that has mouthed along with words that they don't truly believe in, right? Same with we see this playing out in the macro in a lot of government funded institutions, whether it be them training people against how to be anti-racist and things of that, about how signs of white supremacy is wanting to be punctual, being objective oriented, right? Being rational and basing your decisions on reality. Like all this shit, I really do believe the average person, if they had someone sit down in front of them and explain critical race theory, right? If they explained identity politics, if they explained a lot of the extreme leftist Marxist ideology that's capturing our institutions, we'd be like, no, that's silly, that's insane, that's stupid. And yet all of us choose to take the path of least resistance far too often. And again, I'm happy to blame myself as much as anyone else for these things. But at some point in time, I think that we need to start objectively caring about principles, right? And being principle oriented. And that doesn't mean that you need to completely live 100% in alignment with your principles, right? Because understand, we'll have varying priorities and principles. And something that I think Michael Malice does a great job of is regularly stating that anarchy is his primary principle, but not his only principle. So that's why he doesn't just move into the woods and try and live off the land and completely ignore the state. It's why he's willing to pay income taxes and things of that nature. Because again, there are other priorities we have. But at this point in time, it feels like we're getting so abstract in our understanding of reality that very soon, people will literally throw themselves off a cliff in order to prove they're on the right side of a narrative. And it's so dangerous. And I'm just really done with it at this point in time.
Yeah, same. And I think my point here, and something that we brought up on the show in the past, is we get to vote with our dollars, and that's why I don't think I don't think RBC cares if we blame them or not. I think what needs to matter is where their customers coming from, who's supporting them, where are you getting your financing, where are you keeping your cash, who ultimately how are you voting with your dollars and with your business, and that's where I think the free market is still a really interesting place to live in. But moving right along into our last story of the day, this is creepy, and I'm not going to lie, I saw it coming. I think a lot of us talked about it. People that were considering some of the social impacts of the COVID restrictions, mandates, and that type of thing would have seen this coming. But here we go. We figured it was coming, but now they've done a study on it and they have evidence that it did happen. So here's another Zero Hedge story here published today from Tyler Durden. And it's the headline reads, "Babies born in lockdown less likely to speak before first birthday. New study finds." So a study conducted in the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland found that children were less likely to be able to reach so-called development milestones, including waving goodbye and pointing at objects. The study, published in the Archives of Disease and Childhood, focused on 309 babies, so that's actually a pretty good sample size, born in the first 3 months of lockdown in Ireland between March and May 2020, and tested for 10 behavioral milestones at their first birthday, with results then compared against 2,000 babies born between the years 2008 and 2011. The study is titled "Social Communication Skill Attainment in Babies Born During the COVID-19 Pandemic," and found that lockdown babies were 14% less likely to have said their first word and 9% less likely to have started pointing and 6% less likely to wave goodbye. Now, at first glance, pointing, waving goodbye, perhaps these aren't the greatest milestones in your life, right? You'll probably get out of this. You'll probably grow up to do other things. But what I wonder is, can we afford this, right? We all saw this coming. And for me, it was a very, very, very apparent moment in my experience during the COVID pandemic, where I saw this happening in real life and I decided to instantly make a change. So I will never forget this moment. It will be burned into my mind for as long as I live. I was at the grocery store, Metro. I was checking out, and beside me was a lady in front of me that was paying. And I was right behind her. I had all my groceries on the thing. She was holding a baby in like a car seat, and the baby in the car seat looked at me. And it was close to the start of the pandemic. Mask mandates were in full effect, although massive controversy about whether or not they did anything. And most of us had already agreed that it wasn't possible they were going to be saving anybody's life. We knew that at this point, but it was still early, and absolutely you had to wear a mask to be in some of these buildings. And I looked at this baby, and I was wearing a mask. This was early. I was wearing a mask. I look at this baby, and I saw this little child, right? This undeveloped little child staring back at me. And I was smiling under my mask, but I recognized that he couldn't tell I was smiling. So I take my mask down and I smiled at him, and the baby just lit up. I mean, huge smile, the whole facial expressions, moving hands, the whole thing, kicking legs. And I thought in that moment, my God, like, what are we doing to these kids? And I believe that was the last time I wore a mask ever. And I just couldn't believe it. And, we were theorizing this. I mean, there was lots of people saying, what is going to happen to the kids? What is going to happen if this is allowed to exist? I mean, we're messing around with literally hundreds of thousands of years of genetic evolution, right? We've learned to communicate non-verbally primarily, right? That is actually how we communicate. Like, body language is so much of how we develop. And just a little bit further down here, there's a quote here, a tweet from the post-millennial. A speech therapist says her clinic has seen a 364% increase in patient referrals of babies and toddlers. Okay. For some kids, they can find a workaround the mask and still learn to speak perfectly fine. But for others, it can cause speech delays. So I just want to pose this to you, the listener, to Matt. How bad could these unintended consequences get? I mean, delays in developmental speech is going to impact everything in your life. You can't have personal relationships if you can't communicate. You can't have professional relationships if you can't learn to communicate. It's really hard to have romantic relationships that are successful if you can't communicate. We're already seeing, do yourself a favor or a disservice and Google the math results. Google where math is at now for kids, Canadian kids. Okay, for Canadian, do the same thing for America. I don't know the American numbers, but I guarantee you they would be similar. And in Canada, math tests, the EQAO test scores are sliding. They're plummeting. Okay, and I don't think we can afford this as a society. I literally don't think we can afford to mess with new generations like this, especially when we have the demographics that we do in this country. Like, half the country is about to die. They're just at that age. And so who's going to inherit this land? And it's like, man, we cannot afford this stuff. So Matt, I'll give it to you. Hear your thoughts out on this.
Yeah, this has certainly been a concern of mine for a while. Again, I think for a lot of us, initially, we just didn't understand how long this was going to go on. So originally, like 2 weeks to flatten the curve sounded reasonable enough on the surface level, I think, to the average
Agreed.
person. And, 2 weeks, are you really going to damage an entire generation of individuals based upon that? It felt like not a significant issue. I do think that, like, regardless of whether we can afford to pay the price, like, we will pay the price for this, right? Like, the damage has been done. I think that, again, a not insignificant portion of the population still is so COVID hysteria oriented that they will continue to essentially do damage to their children unintentionally, but nonetheless, damage will be done. And yeah, I think that we'll see a huge rise in speech therapists, right? We'll see a huge rise in individuals struggling to be as effectively integrated into society. And I think, like, there's already significant challenges in regards to this generation simply because they're growing up with access to social media and the internet, unlike that has ever been experienced before, right? And anecdotally speaking, there's those studies, right, that show that like young girls are developing a disproportionate amount of social tics and verbal tics because of like what content producers are doing on TikTok. Um, I think that when you layer on the fact that, you know, there's going to be a generation of children that potentially for like a year plus didn't see any human emotion outside of their direct family unit, there's going to be massive consequences there. And I honestly, like, I know that there's been economists and pundits that have came out with predictions on what the total potential cost to our economy could look like. I don't think that we'll ever actually be able to understand the full cost of these decisions and the unintended consequences that spiraled from them. And it really is unfortunate. The best thing I think we can hope for at this point in time is that we really learn our lesson and we stick to that concept of never again. However, I fear to even use that terminology because pretty much anything that we've ever said never again seems to somehow find a way of repeating itself in society. But yeah, it's wild. I definitely know people with young children that their child now through their school needs a speech therapist, right? They're having to go outside the school system to get additional schooling and tutoring in order to try and stay up even just with their peers, let alone try and stay up with what um, a previous generation's level of education would have been.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the article, I invite anybody to go through that article. But as the article continues, you know, they do discuss the idea that, like, hey, it's kind of back. There's still a lot of advocates for bringing back masking and bringing back these types of things over the winter months. And I'm so blown away that we've let this happen and that it went on for as long as it did. So, anyways, I would like to wrap it up there because honestly, that's such a black pill to me that we would do that to an entire generation of babies and even young kids. I mean, this article doesn't talk about adolescents and young kids, but like social isolation and just like the dependence on the technology and social media now that they're going to have is just it's mind numbing and certainly was not to their benefit. I mean, so many kids were forced to stay home where they had far less physical activity, right? On average, I would think they had far less physical activity. It's a miserable learning environment. How distracted are you at home versus in a curated learning environment like a school, right? I mean, unless you've got giant prosthetics floating around the shop, but other than that, I mean, the school should be a really good learning experience. And beyond that, it's just like physical connection, talking to people, man, going to lunch breaks with your friends and playing sports and stuff like that at recess and learning how to play as a team and learning how to communicate. Like this shit is so valuable. It's not even funny. And I'm just thoroughly disgusted that we would allow it to slide this bad. So I want to wrap it up there because honestly, I can't even think about this anymore because that's just so brutal to me. But I guess that sort of leaves us with our tip of the day. So Matt, do you want to kick us off with a tip?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to circle back to my point at the start of the show, which was journaling. I think that can be very powerful, again, regardless of what format you do, as long as you're able to revisit that journaling. Real value there. And I think, as you mentioned at the start of the show, Adam, often very underrated.
Yeah. Okay. That's an excellent tip. I'm going to take it even like one dimension deeper too. I read a lot. Okay. So I crank about, I don't know, 50 books a year or something like that. And I primarily consume them on audio format now. I like to listen to audiobooks when I'm on the go, whether that's driving, doing the dishes, doing my morning routine, going out for walks with the dog, things like that. I'm going to probably have a podcast or an audiobook on. But one thing that I find a lot of people make a mistake with reading is that they never make notes. Okay, so I make actually extensive notes on every book that I'm reading because I can then go back and revisit it. And what I find more often than not with a book is that at different parts of your professional, personal, whatever journey, you will go back and read the same book from a totally different perspective. And when you take notes on it, you can often jog your memory about what the author was saying in a condensed fashion that is in shorthand that you personally understand. And in that sense, I could take, a 2, 3, 400 page book, condense it into 12 pages of my own notes, and organize the way that I like to consume it, and then brush right up on all the lessons learned and takeaways from that book in the space of a few minutes. So that's a pro tip for you guys: is take notes on the books you're reading, and frequently go back and review them and revisit them. And I think too, there's a common, I don't know who said it, maybe Bruce Lee or something like that, said like, fear not the person who tries to learn 10,000 kicks and practices them each once, but, be extremely fearful of the man who practices one kick and practices it 10,000 times. And I think that's a very good lesson to take away when it comes to consuming new knowledge and lessons, right? Thoroughly grok it before you move on and before you get started on something new. And finally, I'll just remind you guys that we do have all of our show notes posted on Substack. So I invite you guys to subscribe to there, as well as join our Telegram group. We're going to be actively posting some of these links and starting engaging conversations there. And if you were trying to watch this on Rumble today, I have no clue what's going on. I changed absolutely nothing, but I will make sure that I upload this to Rumble. So if you're right now pissed off that you're watching this on YouTube and supporting the big bad corporate media, that's okay. I'm going to upload it to Rumble right after this, I promise. And other than that, that wraps up the last 24. I'll see you guys back here in 2.5 minutes. We're going to be talking about live in concert, our favorite concert experiences. So we're going to be having fun. Cheers.
Mm-hmm.
They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day, no matter what the weather say. Life is like a record, so just let it play. Educate, motivate, entertain and demonstrate. Health, wealth, relationships and legacy we elevate. Every day is what you make it, so don't take it and waste it. Never too late to save it. Remember, roses grow from pavement. Let me break this down in layman's. Just wanna live outrageous, build my way to greatness. Gotta speak my truth and face it. Hear the basis lies, gotta challenge it and break it. Take a shot of truth, chase it with some motivation. The best day ever, the best day ever. We gon' squad up, have the best day together. Best day ever, best day ever. We gon' squad up, go harder than any weather. What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day, no matter what the weather say. Life is like a record, so just let it play. Best Day Ever Media. Song by Dan the Lost Boy.
All right, guys, we are back. We're going to be talking about our favorite live concert experiences. We're joined with a special guest, our buddy Dan, the NFT Boy, Dan the Lost Boy, a full-time musician and NFT DJ.
That's it. You hit the nail right on the head. We're just rolling off of some Twitter Spaces fun and back into some more media. Best Day Ever Media, the best kind.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I just thought this would be a great one to bring you in on, Dan, because we're going to be talking about our favorite live music experiences. I've got a handful of questions outlined here, so if it makes sense to you guys, let's just jump into it.
Yeah, let's give her.
All right. And so we'd love to hear from you guys watching this, whether you're watching it live or after the fact. What's your favorite music experience? What's your favorite concert? But before we share our favorite concert experiences, I've got a couple other questions. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Do you remember what was your first, your first real concert experience. I'm going to define like a real concert as you had to pay some sort of cover charge or fee in order to listen to it. So, like the school talent show doesn't count.
Damn, that was going to be my first go-to. But maybe I'll kick it off if you guys don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, so talent show was definitely front of mind. I had a stepbrother that absolutely shredded guitar, so saw him a few times, but that was definitely free 99, no cost involved there. But the one that sticks out as the first and probably the most prolific for me was Avenged Sevenfold, which is kind of like a more heavy metal, heavy rock style band. I used to be kind of emo, as the kids call it, in high school, and that was my first paid show, Centennial Hall in London, an absolute riot. Mosh pits, got punched in the face a few times. So it was a full experience, especially being the first one. But that's what pops up to my mind. And I'm still a fan of that band today, but haven't seen them doing any touring more in the NFT space.
And how old would you have been, Dan?
I want to say probably 15 or 16. So pretty wild that I hadn't really gone to a paid show, up until that point. But it was nice that it was one that was right off the rails. So learned really quick what can go down at a live show and a concert, and had a bunch of fun doing it. Went with a few friends, and that was the talk of the town at school the next day. Anybody that couldn't make it, whether for money reasons or, couldn't get to the city, get a ride from Strathroy, they were definitely FOMOing.
And like based upon that age, did you have a driver or someone's parents like dropping you guys off at the concert and then you raged out in the mosh pit?
Luckily, we knew some DJs that had the license early on, so we did get the ride without, the chaperone, if you will, because that always sucks, because they like to linger, parents, and maybe even show up a little early and catch a little bit of the debauchery in the parking lot. But yeah, it was kind of an all-in friends event. Left from Strathroy right after kind of high school classes were over, straight into the city and straight into some fun, if I'm being honest. Maybe a little bit of rated R fun behind the scenes, but we won't speak on that.
Love it. I actually love the Centennial Hall venue too. It's actually such a great acoustic venue. Like you can get some serious noise in there. And I assume you had permanent ear damage after that, because like I can't even imagine seeing Avenged Sevenfold there. We randomly this year, it came up, there was tickets for Centennial Hall for like, it was just like a random show. And I was like, okay, I just kind of Googled like what's going on in London tonight. And it was like a random show at Centennial Hall. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go. And the band, however it was named, it just sounded like, relatively innocent. It was not. It was absolutely like screamo, hardcore metal. And I was like, oh my God. And it was at Centennial Hall. I left there with for sure permanent ear damage. But, mad respect to that venue for having the number of people they fit in that small space. And then the volume at which they play at is just insane.
I would hate to live
Hall's
around
pretty
there.
decent size.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
it is, but they pretend like it's a lot bigger than it really is.
Agreed. And the
and
speaker
so-
system, I think, fits that.
Adam, what was your first live concert experience?
Okay, so my first concert experience was Linkin Park, and my mom, it was brilliant. She used to threaten me all the time because her and my grandma would go to these home and garden shows, and they would drive down because like I'm from Collingwood, right, which is like 45 minutes to 2 hours away from literally anything. So if you wanted like live music, if you wanted like the movie theater, like that actually had seats that weren't level, you would have to drive to Barrie or Toronto. And so my very first experience there was Linkin Park. And so Linkin Park, it was hilarious because they were like, yeah, that's it. Like I had done something crazy. And my mom's like, that's it. You're coming with me and grandma to the home and garden show. And I was like, son of a bitch. Like this is like literally the last possible thing I want to do on the planet. And it was 2001. So how I would have been like 7 or 8 or 10 or something. I don't know. I'm born in 1994. Somebody smarter than me do that math. But 2001 Media Worldwide Tour. Or sorry, it was 2004. So I was
going to say like 7 seems very young for Linkin Park.
No, 2000. Well, fuck. I think it was 2004 or something. But anyways, it was called the Worldwide Meteora Tour. And, this is when Chester's alive. We got Mike Shinoda. This is just before, oh shoot, what's that other group that Mike did? And it was kind of like hip hop.
Oh, Fort Minor.
Fort Minor. Oh my God, dude. Fort Minor. So it was right before Fort Minor and all that stuff kicked off. And anyways, they threatened me with this home and garden show. You know, grandma's not even in the car when we leave, but I'm like too stupid to really be like, where's grandma? And my mom's like, yeah, she'll totally meet us there. David's there, my stepdad. So I'm like, Dave's coming to the home and garden show, whatever. This is brutal. I'm going to read a book and you know, try and ignore the pain I'm about to suffer through for the whole weekend. And anyways, we get to the hotel and Dave's friends and, you know, a guy I grew up with, and he's just a weapon. Shane comes flying out and he goes, buddy, what's going on? And I go, Shane, what the fuck are you doing at the home and garden show? And I'm still not aware of what's going on here. And anyways, they completely rugged me, and it's Lincoln Park, and we've got floor tickets, and I get absolutely pulled to the front by these massive dudes and my mom. My mom just recruited some, you know, 6'4" mean looking guys to push me right to the front fence. And I think we have photos of, like, you know, Chester's arm, like you can vividly see his tattoos and the microphone and everything. Probably feel the sweat coming off his head. It was an epic experience.
Nice. That's actually like a surprise first concert experience. That adds an extra level of just memory to it.
Yeah.
Well, and the Meteora tour too. Like, I think that's one of the most legendary albums they ever did. And the fact that you saw that tour, that's wild.
Because you got to think, if they're doing Meteora worldwide tour, that means they're also playing Hybrid Theory, right? Which is like the original gangster music from them.
In
it's
the end,
so
yeah.
good. And the guys that I was with, so my buddy Dave's friend actually got like called up essentially on a stage to play a song because he was like, hey, who wants to play this next song? And so they get called up on stage and stuff. It was actually truly epic. And you know, like this guy too, he has like, you know, a similar tattoo to Chester, and he's hand drawn like really cool art based on his tattoos and the band. And I'm just like, oh man, this is cool.
Nice.
And before we keep going, I don't know if you mentioned it, Adam. What location was that? What venue?
Air Canada Center.
Gotcha.
Oh shit! Yeah,
that's a big venue. That's a nice
one.
Epic concert.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
All right.
Last but not least.
Yeah, for my first concert experience, it was like definitely a different vibe than the Air Canada Center. So I'm trying to think now. I feel like it was near the end of high school. So this must have been an all ages event, even though it was at like a dive bar in Sarnia. But the Trues were playing, and this was like before the Trues blew up. I actually love the Trues live, like the Trues, Arkells.
Yeah.
There's actually like some fantastic like kind of Canada only bands almost that never really blew up, but are just like amazing. And anyways, go to this concert. It was a $2 cover. So again, like the Trues were literally nobody then. And there was like 8 of us in the crowd, and 6 of us came in a minivan. So like, again, it was just like this wild experience where it felt like they were just playing for us essentially. And the opening band was like Rocket to the something or whatever. And again, it was just like there was just literally no one there. So the drummer was like the main kind of like banter guy. You know how like often like bands have like the banter guy, and so he's kind of bantering the opening band. And there's only 2 girls in the crowd, like my girlfriend at the time and my buddy's girlfriend. And so like he can tell like this show isn't going to do anything, so he just starts hitting on them. And we were just like, what do we even do right now? Like, this is so weird. This is so awkward. And we just kind of like laughed about it and became kind of an inside joke afterwards. But I remember like going home that night and we were just like so amped up because again, it felt like just like a private show essentially for us in regards to that experience. And I feel like actually a lot of my favorite music experiences have been those like dungy dive bars, like Call the Office. Like there was a phase in my life where like we just went to Call the Office at least once or twice a month. And again, usually like $2, $5, sometimes free cover to see these live bands perform. So yeah, definitely have a lot of fond memories of those just like little intimate settings. And again, like Call the Office, terrible layout, like actually like a very impractical live audience sort of experience because it literally just feels like you're almost in someone's living room. And there was also again, just talking about those like small kind of dive experiences, I think it's the London Music Club, not to be mistaken with the London Music Hall, because the Music Hall is like pimp these days. Although I remember when it used to be like multiple stories and like really grungy and shitty back then as well. But there's the London Music Hall, which I think is on like Waterloo Street or Wellington Street or something like that, downtown London. It's just this big house. And again, like you're essentially sitting in someone's living room listening to a live music performance. There's just something super cool about that stuff.
Yeah. For anybody watching at home, this is kind of what Call the Office setup looks like. I mean, it's absolutely debaucherous. The setup's miserable. Oh wow, we've got the smallest photo
like
on the planet.
The bathrooms are just like they're exactly what you'd expect, right?
Yeah,
Like you're just like, oh my god, I didn't even know London was this hard. But here we are in this Call the Office bathroom with like no door on the stall or whatever, and like again, it's probably been fixed up a little bit since then. I think it's became like a pinball thing, right? Like they've got an arcade and stuff there going these days. But I remember that building actually went up for sale for like $1 million back in 2015, 2016. And I was seriously tempted. I was so tempted to buy it because I was just like, how cool would that be to be the guy that owns Call the Office in London, Ontario?
That would be legendary.
Epic,
right?
for sure.
But let's transition into the next question now. So we've talked about first concert experience. I'd love to hear, is there a favorite music festival? Have you guys like done the music festival scene? What does that look like?
Good one. I'll let you go first if you got something, Adam.
Yeah, sure. A couple really stand out, and of course, this is a loaded and like impossible question to answer. But I always found Warped Tour was epic. I mean, the mud, the blood, and the beer. Come on, it was epic. Like outside, rain or shine, you've got mud in your hair, your nose, your mouth, your eyeballs. And whatever's not mud, it's probably sweat and rain and oh man, or beer, honestly.
Yeah.
That series of concerts was so epic. And I don't think it's going anymore. Maybe Matt can look that up while I'm chatting here. But dude, Warped Tour was epic. But one of the greatest tours ever that stands out in my mind, and it's just because it was so epic. Was called the Family Values Tour, which I don't think anybody has heard of. And you guys missed out because Family Values Tour was so legit. It was all the hardcore shit. Like I first saw there, I saw Korn, Evanescence, Disturbed, right? These groups that like were huge when I was growing up, and like, you know, a huge part of my my youth. And anyways, that was always epic. And it was at the Molson Amphitheater. And what an epic venue. I mean, you're outside, you're in the grass, or you could go down on, and, you know, security was always pretty loose at the amphitheater. So you could buy grass tickets, which were like way cheaper, and then just work your way into the seats. Once you're in the seats, you can work your way down a little closer, down to the floor. And then eventually, somebody's not really paying attention, you sneak onto the floor and then don't leave for the whole day. You know, find a way to stay down there all day. Hopefully you haven't broken the seal and you can party down there as long as you want. But talk about a mosh pit, man. The Korn mosh pit was legit the place you would go to die. And like these dudes were crazy looking. And I mean, just think who's consuming Disturbed and Korn and whatever. These dudes are wild. So I think Family Values Tour and close tie would be Warped Tour, Vans Warped Tour, which, by the way, I forgot was Vans. It was called Vans Warped Tour.
Yeah. I just quickly checked. Yeah, it stopped in 2019. So I don't know if COVID killed it or what the deal is there, but that is sad because I never went to Warped Tour, and yet like I actually just have a fond association with Warped Tour because of
You never went? Oh,
no,
Matt,
never.
I would have thought I was stoking your fire here.
No, so like never went, but like the moment I hear Warped Tour, I can't help but think of Blink-182, and like there's one song, right? Like fell in love with the girl at Warped Tour, and just like that energy, I guess, just encapsulates like my thoughts and memories of like music festivals.
I just got chills chills straight up.
It's like that late 90s, early 2000s rock vibe. And I actually played one of the new Blank songs on our spaces today. And just that in itself was like a kick of nostalgia that is literally leading back to like a Warped Tour vibe. And now we're talking about it here. Hilarious. And I never actually got to witness a Warped Tour either. Although, again, I feel like I have. I think I can relate to Matt there, where it's like such a culturally relevant thing. I've listened to so much music that's referenced it. People saying that, you know, that was some of the wildest shows they have ever been to. But a big FOMO here, dude, especially the fact that it's no longer That might be just the nail in the coffin. Never
I-
going to do a Warped Tour.
I would have bet everything I own that both of you would have been like massively
Like, I
into
would have
I'm
bet
ashamed.
that,
Warped
yeah, like, yeah, I would have bet too, honestly. Like, if I didn't know my own experience, that like between me and Dan, you'd be safe betting one of us would have been there. But
Oh my
no.
god! If you guys
There's a
want to
little bit of
really
guilt.
if you guys want to really like hurt yourselves over this subject matter, just Google the lineups. Google the
Oh
historical
yeah, they were
lineups.
fantastic.
I
And
mean,
like
fuck.
a vibe for sure.
Dude, and even like some of the groups you were listing off there, Adam, like again, through some of my high school years, that was like my go-tos, Disturbed, things like that. So I would have killed to see one, let alone two, let alone a whole lineup of some of those groups all in one kind of weekend or jam pack. It would have been a riot. But I
So,
kind of started.
Hold on.
Yeah, go for
Sorry.
it.
I just got to throw one last thing with Warped Tour. Alexis on Fire. We saw at Warped Tour.
The best.
And is Adam not rocking the piss of a lifetime out at the, because it's all outdoors, right? And there's a couple different stages and whatever, and so multiple shows are kind of going on at once, and it's kind of hard to be everywhere. Alexis on Fire is, I can't remember if they were coming up or coming off. I think they were coming up, and they were like, one or two artists next. I have the piss of a goddamn lifetime. I've walked away from one of the main stages. I'm in the porta potty thing. Porta potty. I come flying out of there. I'm just glowing. I'm like stoked. I come flying out of there, and who is literally staring me in the eyeballs but Dallas Green? And I go, Dallas, buddy, I've just pissed, but I still want to shake your hand. He goes, go for it, buddy. Good to see you here. And Dallas Green and I have this moment of complete unsanitary brohood. And I think that takes the cake on Warped Tour.
That's a rocker vibe, man. If Dallas said anything other than hell yeah, let's do it, I would have maybe thrown some shade, but not surprising there. And dude, he's gone on to do his own incredible stuff. So Alexis on Fire, huge W there, but Dallas Green, I think that might have been the hand slap I'd been looking for. Maybe the lead singer because the screaming, but Dallas definitely. But I was going to say, I kind of transitioned out of like rock music into rap, and then actually out of rap into like electronic dance music over the last, say, 5 years. So I've actually had quite a few great festivals, more EDM centric. And the one that really stands out to me is Ever After. The first year they did it in Kitchener-Waterloo area at Bingham's. So kind of just an wide open park. Again, was raining, so tons of mud. And an artist that I really like in the electronic space called Chami. He dresses up as like a priest, and you kind of praise, the stage and everything. And I knew almost all of his music at that time. I was going hard in the gym, so it was a compliment there. And I went to this festival all alone, 100% alone, from London. So drove into a buddy's house, left my car there, went out solo because no one wanted to come. I said, Chami's playing, dude. We got to go praise. So may have gotten into some fun substances, again, even by myself, finding myself up against that front rail, just raging solo, and can confidently say probably one of the best times I've ever had. And it didn't rely on, well, maybe some substance, but not friends or anybody else kind of needing to be your support. Just literally being there for the music, for the artist, and feeling like, don't need anybody else here, man. It's just me, you, play the set in the pouring rain. And yeah, it's probably one of my top faves for festivals, even though I'm listing one artist because that's all I could almost remember, and that's why I went. There was probably other really good ones. We're going to highlight Chami on this one, though.
I could be wrong, Dan, but I actually think I was recently a little bit upset that I wasn't going to be in London because I'm pretty sure Chami's playing in London.
Dude.
London, Ontario, London Music Hall, November 4th, dude. It's coming right up. Because
I might have to go.
Because I was thinking like, oh shit, I'm going to be leaving for Matt's. But now, actually, with our new schedule, maybe I'll make that, won't I, Matt?
Hey, now.
What was the schedule we had said? Oh, yeah, that's the day before I'm planning on leaving. Maybe I'll just be there.
Hey, maybe I have to take that in a sidebar, Adam. I might be interested to see Chami round 2. You, though, Matt, any festivals on your kind of docket that stand out?
Yeah, the big one for us, we would like make a pilgrimage every year to Osheaga, and probably for like 5, 6, might have even been 7 years straight. We went there, and it was just like unlike anything else, right? I think like over 100,000 people. It'd be a 3-day event. It's on the island in Montreal, right? So like you take the subway there, and like just like everyone is there for Osheaga because it's like 8 a.m. on the subway on like a Friday, and again, everyone dressed like for music festivals, like cranking beers on the subway and stuff like that, just all those crazy things. And yeah, it would like it stands out to me as like a bookmark in my life, the Osheaga experience, and just all the fun and shenanigans we'd get into. We were like also, like typical lean fire type people, so very frugal. So it was always about like having alcohol strapped to your body so that when they like searched you, they wouldn't find it. Because like even back then, it would be like $10 a beer. And so you're just like, oh man, it's gonna be very hard. And like, weed wasn't legal then. So like you'd have like stashes in your wallet and stuff like that. And like again, like they would like make you open your purse, open your wallet and all that. And like it was always just this arms race of us trying to like get one step ahead of security in regards to that. But the very first time that we went to Osheaga, it was just me and one buddy. He talked me into it, and we drove there, got there, and like the first night, it was just like this crazy magical experience, like one of those things, like from what is it, the bachelor party movie, right? Whatever that was called.
Oh, the Hangover.
Yeah. It was like one of those things where like we like got into a party we shouldn't have been at, and then into this other thing and this other thing. We literally like we didn't make it back to our hotel room. We got lost, but it turns out we literally passed out in the park across the street from our hotel. And like literally again, like both of us just like lying down on the curb, passed out. Wallets there, like phones there, everything was there. Like somehow we didn't get robbed or mugged. It was just like, typical white privilege experience or whatever you want to frame it as, because like just two dudes just like being completely ridiculous that entire weekend long. But yeah, that definitely stands out to me as like my absolute like Osheaga. And again, like they'd always have like the best lineups, right? So like it'd be the same bands touring Coachella would come to Osheaga. That. It would like they somehow always just got the guys like as they were popping off. So yeah, just absolutely amazing. But kind of leads me into the next question here. So is there like a concert series, a music festival? Was there anything that you guys like made a pilgrimage to? Like every year you went and had this experience? And I'll let you guys think about that for a second, because I've got another one. And this one, again, like exact opposite of the pilgrimage to Osheaga, but this was a pilgrimage every like Boxing Day, usually it was, to Call the Office. And this band that like most people have never heard of, but they had one song blow up on like a commercial. And I'm going to do a screen share here just so you guys, because I don't know if you even recognize this band, but again, to me, it's hilarious. All right.
I'm guessing in my brain who it is. Who it is right now.
Was it Electric Six?
Nope.
Honest Abe.
Yeah, and so literally we would go to this show, right? It was almost always Boxing Day, so the day after Christmas. It became just like this reoccurring thing. Again, for probably 4 or 5 years, we went there as long as they did it. Obviously, Electric Six wasn't doing that great, that they were playing a Boxing Day event at Call the Office, but it would sell out-ish, right? You could always get tickets, but we'd buy our tickets early. They literally traveled in like a shitty van. When we'd get there, we'd see the shitty van parked and Call the Office. We'd be like, fuck yeah, Electric Six is here. And it got to the point where, again, like we eventually started to become such a crowd in of ourselves. A lot of my friends growing up were from Park Hill, Ontario. And so we would just yell Park Hill. And then it became a reoccurring joke with the band when they'd come back the next year. They'd be like,
no way,
Park Hill, Ontario here. And we'd be like, wah! And just like losing our shit. And yeah, and I've got some very blurry photos of us with the band. One of us would usually at least get pulled up on stage because, again, Call the Office is that sort of environment. And yeah, it's fun sometimes to have those like inside jokes or reoccurring things. Like, again, this was just like a pilgrimage we would make every single year. It went without question. If they were playing, we were going to be there at Call the Office with them. So curious, did you guys have any sort of pilgrimages where like, or maybe followed the band to multiple venues while they were playing a series of concerts?
Yeah, like for me and our family, it was always Linkin Park. Like they were just obsessed with it. And so like every single time I think that they ever played in Toronto, we were there. So that was kind of like a given. But one of the pilgrimages I still would like to make before I'm too old for this type of shit is the what is it called? Tomorrowland, or that is what
Yeah.
it's called, right? I really
Yeah.
want to do that. And I've also wanted to go to Oshiaga as well, but yeah, that was a thing. And like one like random, it felt like a pilgrimage at the time because we were like fairly young. I think we were in grade 7 or something. And one of my best friend's older brother had just got his car. So he just got a car, he just got a license, just had the ability to drive. And we went and we did this huge drive, what felt crazy because nobody else was willing to drive us. We drove to Barrie to see Protest the Hero. At a venue that is now gone, I think, but it was called The Mansion. It's basically called The Office, but like even grungier. And it was not by any stretch of the goddamn imagination a mansion. But if you went in there, and this place was wild. I mean, like this might have been 100-person venue, and 100 people were moshing for this show. And I mean, seriously, it was like the most intense experience ever. And we ended up getting we got pulled up on the stage. They were like, look at these goddamn kids that are here. And we got like kind of crowd surfed throughout it. It was epic. And like, sure, there was only like 100 people in like this dive of a freaking venue. And it was just mental. But like, doing that at that age, like just having his brother be able to drive us, it was just mind blowing. We're like, wait, you're not a parent. How could you possibly do this? Right. And then like driving us back, and it was him and his girlfriend, Amanda. And I'll literally never forget those people. And I ran into her like, you know, it must have been like 10 years later, 15 years later. And she was, serving us at this one place. And I go, holy shit, are you Amanda? And her last name. So I go, are you Amanda? Whatever. And she goes, yeah. And I'm like, do you remember that Protest the Hero concert that we went to with Shane? And she just goes, no fucking way. I'm like, you're Adam or one of Gav's friends? And I go, yeah. And she's like, holy shit, that was nuts. Anyways, like the ability for music to be a connector like that, like it's just so amazing.
And those real life experiences too. Like I think you can connect with somebody if you've like listened to an album back cover to cover, but then you like double down with an experience like that. And especially at a young age where you're like breaking some norms as far as freedom goes. You're like, man, we're going to go to another town or city. My parents or somebody else's parents aren't driving. You feel like you're off the rails in the best way possible. But I haven't really ever done like pilgrimage to get to an annual event, but one that just comes to mind that I've gone to multiple times, I'd assume you guys have as well, is Rock the Park here in London. It usually brings me out at least, for one of the days or one of the acts or one of the groups. So maybe not a pilgrimage because it's literally just downtown, but something that's reoccurring, pops up, and usually, I don't know, something to tickle the fancy of us Londoners. And the odd time they have a good group. And I'm trying to think of the name of the bar. You guys will probably be able to help me. But Bob Noxious frequents it all the time.
I know what you mean. I can't even think of it now, though.
Terrible that none of us can think of it. I was Googling it and I couldn't find it because it's called The Office, and
it was like in East London, right? Like off of Huron Street.
Again,
what was it? It was like that, and that's where all the Cougars were.
Hey, let's go.
Hey, yo.
Speaking of Cougars, do you know who I saw this year at Rock the Park? Freaking Alanis Morissette. And let me tell you right now, she put on a goddamn show. Really, it was epic. It was so good. Alanis Morissette. Also this year, we saw the Glorious Sons there. Fantastic. The Trews. Right? Matt brought up the Trews are so goddamn good live. It doesn't make any sense because their music's mostly terrible, but live it is amazing. We also saw, hold on to your seats because this was wild. This year at Rock the Park, we had TLC.
Whoa,
we had Aqua, Ja Rule, who murdered. Ja Rule murdered. It was so good. This dude is on so much TRT. It's unbelievable. He was so jacked. There wasn't a single girl in the crowd that wasn't just flooded. We had DMC from Run DMC. Fantastic. Ace of Base and 112, which I didn't even remember. And somehow I missed the 2 Live Crew, which was bullshit because I really wanted to see that. But what a freaking lineup. What a lineup.
That is
London, Ontario. And, beers were like $17, so that kind of sucked, but did in fact have multiple and it was amazing.
Stretch the budget. It was worth
ran
it.
in. Hey, another example of just like how music works. Ran into some lady. We're at the gate, about to buy tickets. She goes, "Hey, we had a friend cancel. Do you guys want to like do this whole weekend for 50% off?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I want to do that. Of course I do." And then had zero way to pay her because I'm like, "Well, I need all this money for beer." She's like, "Don't worry, you'll be back tomorrow. Pay me then." And anyways, we ended up making great friends with these two totally random ladies, listened to the whole concert series with them over the weekend, still chat with them and all that. Met a mortgage lender there. It was like crazy. It's just music can just bring so many people together. And yeah, I mean, what a time. Look at that lineup. Alanis Morissette. I was like, we have to go. Called my mom, obliterated. Alanis Morissette, it says she was playing at 9:30. Well, she played until like midnight or something like that. I FaceTime mom at midnight. I'm like, "Dude, it's fucking Alanis Morissette." I'm like, "Isn't it ironic?" And she's like, "Actually, it's not really ironic." All right, shut up, mom.
Was it more like acousticy or was it like rock? Like, did she get into some heavy?
Both. They were giving her.
Love it.
They were absolutely sending. It was one of the best shows I've seen in a long time.
That's top tier energy because I need some of those ebbs and flows. I need to hear some acoustic breakdown and then I need to get my face melted straight off.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what band actually, I forgot to mention them. And if you guys don't even know these guys, something to pay attention to. July Talk. These guys.
Oh yeah, July Talk's fantastic.
Very good.
Yeah.
They put on a show. And I mean, like, I couldn't tell if they were acting or if they believed their own shit. But like the show that I witnessed, I was like, whoa, this is top tier entertainment. And like the music was really good as well. But like just their whole stage presence and how they interact with each other and like the weird like sexual tension and like all this shit that they put in the stage. And you're just like, this is so epic. Pretty cool.
Yeah, and like his voice is just so different, right? Well, and then layer in hers and like it's a hell of an experience. But I know
this
for
is
a
the
while.
Guy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
this is the guy. Oh shit, I'm on the wrong thing. I can't zoom in. But I mean, he looks like, he's like 100-pound dude. And like his voice is that of like 100-year-old smoking whiskey bourbon, veteran. It's wild.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man, I still can't think of the name of that bar, Dan, and it's going to drive me crazy because I can picture it. And there was there was two of them, right? So like there was a location in London. I think the other one was like in Tilsonburg or another like no-name town. And like I feel like it was even like a woman's name or something. But anyways,
it literally is. Are
you guys talking about Roxanne?
I don't think. No.
Oh well, that's another
definitely
shit bar
not
in London.
But anyways, moving on. So kind of switching gears here before we get into our best concert experience ever. Is there like a worst concert experience? And maybe it's the venue was terrible, maybe it's the bands were terrible, or maybe it's you had a really bad trip and everything else was great. But I'd love to hear is there one experience that stands out for you guys? I'll let you think about that for a little bit, but this one's not really like a bad experience because honestly it always just works out in the end and it becomes hilarious with hindsight. But one year at Osheaga there was a group of us and for us it was always like alcohol and weed. Those were really the only things we were doing at a music festival. This one girl was with us though, and she was a little bit more experienced with other drugs, so she brought like a bunch of Molly, and she brought a bunch. She didn't know how to properly dose it though. So she ended up just like completely overdoing it. Norma Jeans. Yes, you are 100% right, Dan.
I had to
Norma
find
Jeans.
it. I had to find it.
That's satisfying. Yeah, Norma
My heart
Jeans.
can
That
rest.
was hilariously sketch. Yeah, they used to have some really cheap drink specials and stuff. But yeah, anyways, she ended up like really overdoing it on the Molly and ended up like they've got like the tents, right? For people that are clearly like tripping too hard or like ODing. And so she got separated from us. She decided like, fuck it, I'm just going to do everything I've got, which was way too much. And we ended up not finding her until like near the end of the night. And she was still like struggling to the point where like we weren't going to be able to get her on the subway. And so we missed the last subway and we had to walk like 5 kilometers because again, we were too frugal to be willing to afford a cab. And like, it was just like this crazy journey again. It almost makes me think of the movie The Warriors, where like they're crossing through these different neighborhoods and like all this different stuff. And that was us. And like, at the time, I remember being mildly pissed because somehow I ended up being like the parent of the group, and one of the other girls in our group had a cast in crutches. So like we were moving so slow because I've got
Oh my
one person
God.
Just a
tripping balls, the other one in a
ragtag
cast
trio.
in crutches, and it was just like
It's
this
the
wild
Goonies.
experience.
like a movie.
We were the gang that
A
couldn't
scene out
shoot
of a
straight
movie.
that night for sure.
Yeah.
It's funny because I kind of want to coattail off of an experience I already mentioned here, which was that Ever After. And when the show ended, I'm shirtless, absolutely fired up, like just sweating again.
Wet.
Maybe some similar female's name drug involved. Wet again, hot, worked out, and there's nobody I know there because I'm solo. Pouring rain, and the way you enter into the Bingamons is down a very steep hill. So literally everyone, it was like a scene again out of a movie. People are crawling and like clawing at this mud hill, grabbing onto strangers and like supporting themselves with them to get back up to the road to be able to even get your ride or your cab. And again, frugality hits where I'm like, I'm not paying for an entire cab. I'm one man. So you start trying to chum up with somebody. It's pouring rain and freezing. So I'm under a business in like a little commercial section in Kitchener-Waterloo. Get in there with some other guys and, hey, where are you headed? Close enough to me. Can I hop in with you? And I ended up just skating the bill. So frugality always wins there, ladies and gents. But it's funny, the best turned into the worst with just the conditions, trying to get home. Everything's great until the concert ends, and then you're all on your own, and you're like, oh, we got to get back to safety. Not always the most fun. So that's something that stands out for like kind of a negative on my end.
Mm-hmm. Anything jump to mind, Adam?
Yeah, I was just thinking, and for some reason I couldn't remember the band name. I could just remember the album cover, and the title of the album was El Camino. And of course that's the Black Keys. But I was thinking about the Black Eyed Peas. I'm like, no, that's definitely wrong. But anyways, the Black Keys, I went and I saw them with a lady friend at one point, and I don't even know, but I couldn't even think of a negative concert experience. This definitely was like a shitty experience, but it's the only one ever. The Black Keys murdered. Okay, they played
As
like
they usually do. Yeah.
album quality. Like it was actually kind of disgusting how good they were. But I was so fucking shit-faced that I literally just couldn't keep it together. Like I remember my girlfriend at the time being like, dude, you're actually retarded. Like you are not somebody that should be in public right now. And I was like, rah, rah, rah. And I straight up, I think I slept through half the show, woke up, forgot the entire thing. And then it got dragged home by my girlfriend, who was just absolutely impressed at the time. And yeah, whoa, what a ride. But I do remember the first few songs being totally epic. Another hilarious concert experience that I'm just thinking of right now that wasn't exactly perfect was in London at the Budweiser Garden, or whatever the hell it's called, like the big one in London. We just recently saw, I can't, wow, this is how bad it got. I can't even remember. It was somebody important, and then Marilyn Manson. And I was there with my stepdad, my mom. They're crazy, of course. Just a little background on these guys. Like my stepdad has been to probably over 1,000 concerts, and like he has like entire music rooms like dedicated, like
Oh, wow.
straight up like crazy shit. His album collection is probably like maybe one of the coolest in Canada.
That's wild.
The dude's off the hook, probably invested every single penny he's ever made into music. And so like, that's just kind of the culture that was in our house. And like, so I think he's seen like Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, Metallica, and Guns N' Roses, like these guys, he's probably seen them like dozens of times.
Damn.
And like all the greats, if they were alive in his time, he's voyaged to see them. So anyways, my stepdad comes with my mom. We go to see, and I'm kind of pissed now that I can't think of who was before Marilyn Manson, because they were really good.
I think, was it Rob Zombie?
Yeah, Rob Zombie.
Oh.
And Rob Zombie was actually
Banger.
really good. So Rob Zombie finishes. Marilyn Manson's coming on stage. I see my stepdad getting his ass hauled out of the stadium. Right. And I'm like, well, what the hell is going on here? Turns out they were smoking a joint on the floor, which every single person in the building was doing. And so anyways, I decide I'm not down with that. And I'm like, well, fuck you guys. And anyways, I had two giant beers, like huge beers. And I'm like, hey, what the fuck are you guys doing? And they're like, hey, yeah, he's out, whatever. And they're dragging him. And I'm like, well, fuck you guys. Like, this is bullshit. And they're like, okay, well, you look drunk. You're out. And I'm like, oh, really? I look drunk. And I proceed to just dominate two giant, like just skull 2 mugs of beer. And they're like, well, now you're definitely out. So anyways, stepdad and I get kicked out. Mom's abandoned watching fucking Marilyn Manson. She doesn't even notice because she's at the front going crazy. And anyways, we get kicked out. Somehow we get separated. I get lost. I straight up get lost. I am lost in my own city that I live in. And like 3 hours later, I don't even recall what happened in between. I just emerge from the park. So like, it's not Victoria Park, but like that park down by the water. God, I won't even remember what it is, but it like it's down
probably
below
where Rock the Park is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whatever that park's called. I'm down in there. I emerge like from a trail. And I'm like, what the fuck am I doing here? And I call my mom. My phone's at 1%. I call my mom. I'm like, Mom, I have no idea where I am. I'm going to meet you downtown though. And anyway, she has to drive around and fucking find me. So hilarious.
Buddy, that all sounds very in line with the Adam I've had some evenings with and partied with, the sculling 2 beers in the face of defiance, like, watch me. But at the same time, even when I met your mom, Adam, I heard some of these stories about some rager concerts, and I think she can hold her own out there. So even if she gets separated in solo, Mama Martin goes hard. Let's go. One other thing I wanted to bring up, because again, it was a gift. And when I got the gift, I was like, this is going to be the shittiest concert I've ever been to. You get the ticket. You're like, thanks. My parents got me tickets to Nickelback, which,
oh, dude, that'd be sick.
And again, like, I think I was at the age where I just wanted to like FUD everything, just like throw shit. Oh, this is garbage. This isn't exactly what I wanted. It's not the meta for this time frame. But then ended up going to what I will only refer to as the JLC. I don't care about this upgrade Budweiser Gardens. It's the JLC, people. Always will be.
What is JLC? What did that mean?
The John Labatt Center. When
Labatt
had the sponsorship.
Check.
So it's like, again, even in Toronto, like the Rogers Center still sounds weird to me. We'll go with it. But yeah, the JLC Nickelback ended up being like a face melting show. And if you get up into the big high seats, and I hadn't been in there for a while, but like you're like almost straight down, like it's scary where you're like, I feel like I'm gonna fall off the kind of edge of this thing. But it was a great vantage point watching Chad Kruger do his thing, and Canadiana as it gets, and one of those front facing, saw the ticket, I'm like, this is gonna be a letdown. Walked out with my parents being like, dude, Nickelback is pretty sick. Like Nickelback goes hard in the paint. So sometimes everybody out there that's listening, front facing isn't everything. You gotta just dig into the experience and take it for what it is. It's not always, what it seems like it'll be.
There's definitely bands that like they were opening right, or you're at a music festival and there's nothing else going on, so you're like, I gotta watch something. And like, yeah, there's so many bands where either my level of respect and enjoyment of their music like doubled or tripled once I've seen them live. Like, there's just something very powerful about that experience.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, this leads us to the big question, best concert experience. So maybe we've already covered it, maybe we haven't, but I'd love to hear from you guys. Is there a best concert experience, one that just like beats out all the others?
I got one. And it was just, I think, again, the time frame of my life where it was my favorites. Like, literally got to see almost every one of my favorite artists at the time in one show. And it was actually a Young Money tour. So, like, Lil Wayne, Drake, Nicki Minaj, like, the whole Young Money crew, Tyga. It was the entire crew. And at that point, they had an album out. So, like, collab track, so everybody was kind of working with each other. Birdman was there at the time. I think everybody in my high school and in my age bracket, Lil Wayne obsessed, like literally was the guy during a milli, all those things. So that was at the Molson Amphitheater, as Adam referenced already. So you're half outside, beers are flowing, really nice day in Toronto, and really just a perfect scene for that like epic show. And again, it was a gift. I seem to get a lot of gifts for free concerts and stuff. Went with my brother, which was like first time doing a concert together, and he was a massive Lil Wayne fan. So that was kind of my favorite, just for the encapsulation of like everything being the epitome at the time. Like, felt like we were the luckiest people in the world to be seeing all of these artists right in the same show and for a reasonable price, I think. Got the gift. So that's probably my favorite. Again, I love Toronto. Great city to visit for a show. Probably wouldn't live there. And a great venue for some of the biggest artists in the world at that time.
Yeah, that's epic, Dan.
It was
I guess in the sort of rap hip hop genre, I've only been to one rap hip hop show, other than like I guess they were calling that hip hop night, what I was talking about with like TLC or not TLC, but Ja Rule and them. But the one legit goat that I did see, and it was with Mike Burgess there. We had a couple shrooms and we went to see Jay-Z, and that show was fucking epic. That was a banger. I'm not sure I would go as far as saying it was my favorite show experience. And I honestly don't even know how you categorize that. Like, I think one of the shows that I'm most happy I saw, because I don't think I'll ever get the chance again, is Black Sabbath. Going to see Ozzy live is like nothing else. The dude's epic, and he's still out there giving her. So that was a really cool experience. There's a series of random experiences that I've really loved. And one of them was seeing, Jason Aldean or something. He's like a country singer.
Yep.
Or Jason McCoy. It was Jason McCoy, Jason. So he's actually the singer from the Roadhammers, which you guys might know that name. But anyways, he was in Collingwood, right where I'm from, playing at the Gaiety Theater, which is this like old theater that's been shut down for years. And now they kind of use it for little events and stuff. Anyways, this dude's huge. And he comes and he's playing an electric show, and the fucking power goes out to the whole city. And my man rolls deep with a cell phone flashlight and an acoustic guitar and plays the rest of the show.
Whoa.
And my God, did it ever go over? I just got chills again. And so I'm there with my grandma, my mom, my grandpa, and this dude, we're all like, oh, what's going on? This is kind of crazy. No, fuck that. He grabs an acoustic guitar. He just plays the rest of his set like nothing happened. It was so awesome. And then we got to go and meet him after the show behind the theater. And like, just what a cool small town kind of thing to do. Like, he didn't have to do that. Obviously, surely whatever contract would have been in place, he could have just walked off. But really interesting experience. And then one more, and I forgot to mention this, or perhaps we were circling back on this, but a voyage. I know we did that, but a voyage that we did make where I got, again, surprised, is my family and I went to Six Flags, Darien Lake, which is like kind of, American Wonderland, if you will, but done American style. So it's better. And there, I guess one of the craziest experiences was seeing Kid Rock live in concert right around the time that they were doing that song, I Put Your Picture Away.
Oh, with Sheryl Crow.
Sheryl Crow. And anyways, my man has strippers in cages in the air. And fuck me if I'm not a kid going, what in the hell? Let's be rock stars, man. I'm just like,
I love this guy.
Mom, can I be a rock star? She's like, sure, dude. If that's what you want, then you do that. I'm like, strippers in cages? She's like, sure, dude.
Done.
Like, fuck yeah. Oh, man. But I think those are some of the better ones. And obviously the Linkin Park thing was cool.
Huge.
Yeah, I think those unique experiences are what like really stand out for me when I think about like most memorable. And the first year we went to Osheaga, like back then I wasn't on social media really at all, but my buddy was, and he was like constant, like throughout the entire weekend, like checking Twitter. And I just remember being like, dude, like I don't get it, like what's going on here? He was like, look, man, there's going to be this secret show. The only way you can get tickets is on Twitter. He's like, we have to go. And he was like way bigger of a music fan than me. And I was like, okay, well, like that sounds cool or whatever. Like, yeah, let's do it. We ended up like getting tickets. It was this very complicated process, especially because like this would have been, I don't know, like mid.
Well, this has got to be early Twitter too. Like, I don't think Twitter would have been laid out this like nicely.
Yeah, and like I don't want to misspeak here, but I'm gonna say like maybe it was like 2010 or something like that. So like again, like Twitter wasn't what it is today. And he got this ticket. He's like, man, it's a secret show. It's the Arkells, and there's some other bands, but like we don't know anything. But what was really cool was it was a theme show. So it was Motown Funk.
Cool.
So everyone was going to be playing Motown Funk, and none of these bands are known. Well, it turned out like. Yeah, I guess I could reverse engineer this if I really did some sleuthing, but it ended up being the Trues, the Arkells, the Sheepdogs, and that was the year the Sheepdogs were like
Oh,
the thing.
blowing up.
And I forget, there was one or two other Canadian bands as well, but like all these bands were just like gaining traction, and it was just like this magical experience because they're all playing like funky music, and like again, just like you spent the whole day at a music festival, listen to them play their hits, and then you get to go into this small venue, and like they were all just
Epic.
fucking around. Like you could tell, like this was almost like I don't know this as a fact, but I would almost guarantee, again, they weren't massive bands, so this was a way for them to like get paid to have fun. And essentially like they would come out and like take over for each other. So like you would have a couple Sheepdogs playing with the Arkells, and like just these weird combinations that I imagine they've never done since or before that. And it was just this really unique experience, again, similar to that idea of like, you know, the power going off and like he's playing by, you're just like, no one else is ever going to have this experience again. And there's something
So
like really
sick.
Yeah,
fun
one-on-one.
about participating in that. Yeah, truly a one-of-one experience. So
Wild, man.
My grandparents have gone to Nashville. I don't know if it's multiple times now, but I think it may be multiple times. And like, dude, one of the coolest things like that they bring back is like, you know, they'll be having a rye and Pepsi's, like my grandpa's drink. He'll be having a rye at like a bar, and then like, you know, Toby Keith or somebody of that sort of like level of fame will just fucking walk by or like sit down at the bar or just play a set. And you're like, what in the hell? And I think for that reason too, Nashville's high on my list of places I would like to make a voyage to.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not particularly a country listener, but I find live music is just so like, it's like a virus, a positive virus. Like as soon as you hear live music, you're just like, your whole spirit gets lifted. It doesn't really matter the genre. And we randomly, another cool experience I had is we were sitting here. It was like, you know, it was like the afternoon. We were just kind of having a lazy morning. And I was like, hey, do you want to like do something cool today? And Christina was like, yeah, sure. I mean, what are you thinking? And I'm like, well, let's drive to Barrie. I'm pretty sure, Boots and Hearts is like starting in like a few hours. And if we leave right now, we can make it for the first show. And she's like, all right, dude, sure, let's go. And we were packed up in the car within like 20 minutes, booked the hotel on the way, right? Bought the tickets on the way and just landed there. And like, I don't really love country music, but we had the most fun weekend ever at Boots and Hearts, just like enjoying live music and the energy that it brings with the people that are there. So like we made tons of friends that were, you know, people that were tenting there and whatever. And I just love that sort of spontaneous, just kind of adventures that you can get into. And it looks like we've frozen Matt.
yeah, can you guys hear me?
I can hear you. So.
Yeah.
This is so weird. I was watching us on camera and I'm like, how do I look so still?
I thought the same thing. I'm like, Matt is
Hey,
extremely
Matt,
stoic.
This is not how you're going to win this staring contest bet. I won't
Actually,
stand for it.
I feel very confident that I could win it right now. But yeah, honestly, Nashville's really high on my list too.
Yeah.
I watched an interview with John Rich from like Big and Rich. I don't know if you guys remember,
Yep.
like
Oh,
Save
yeah.
a Horse, Ride a Cowboy guy.
Absolutely.
Hanger.
And apparently he's got like this killer club in downtown Nashville, like on whatever the main street is. I think it's maybe Broadway. And he was just talking about how like they'll just bring in like on like a Friday or Saturday night, he'll just bring in his buddies and they'll just like riff. And
So
like you'll get
cool.
some of the biggest musicians in country music just like goofing around and like yeah, it just sounded like, again, there's some of those like one-of-one experiences to be had in Nashville.
Well, Matt, I
sure.
100% commit that I will go with you to Nashville
Let's
as soon
do
as
it.
we
Let's
can
go.
fly there, man. I'm so down.
Let's go.
So down.
Let's go. And I've heard from some friends and like, you know, colleagues that really are country music maxis that like, if I get maybe you don't listen to it on the radio, but they always convince me. They're like, dude, if you go to a country show, your mind will be blown. Like
Yeah.
you will see it from a whole new angle, a whole new perspective, and maybe have a new respect for it. And like, I think with the modernization of country music, because it's not what it once was, it's becoming increasingly more like rap, you know, BPM and even the rhythm of it. So I find myself gravitating toward it from like a songwriting standpoint, where I'm like, oh, this is almost like how I would write like a hip hop or a pop song. But the energy I could imagine coming from a stage from some of these guys, a full band. And to Matt's point about the, you know, eclectic shows that are like one-of-ones, mix-ups of bands, like that's like basically being inside an intimate jam session with a bunch of like A1 caliber artists and just being a fly on the wall and being able to absorb that energy and like see how those guys even, work with each other when they're from completely different groups and bands. It's almost like a language they all speak. And, like Matt was saying, hand the guitar to the next guy and he just takes off, doesn't even care if it's fully in tune. Those one-on-ones are incredible. And I don't think I've had enough of them. Like from what I've told you guys, a lot of festivals, a lot of kind of like pretty high production value concerts, but I think sometimes the low production value and the really, again, one-of-one intimate shows are the big memories. So I think I need to stack a few more of those in my kind of memory book.
Actually reminds me when I was at Rock the Park, the Trews came out and played with Glorious Sons and started like playing their songs.
So
and that was another cool, like just random, like, like what the hell, like how often is this going to happen really? And it's just so cool to be there for those things and just, and have the receipts. And I'm packing up my house right now cause I'm moving. And just yesterday, I found the original photo of me on the floor at Family Values Tour and the lead singer of Korn with his like super unique microphone.
Oh yeah.
And it's just like, and it's again, Matt, like you said, it's like the shittiest, most blurry photo ever, but it just took me right back to that experience. And you're just like, wow, what a time. So
yeah, it's funny how concerts are so visceral like that. Like, again, even an image, a ticket stub, it just brings you right back there. And like, I mean, a lot of memories I remember, but maybe not so like, again, I think visceral is the right word there, where you really like feel like you're back in that moment in time. So again, for anybody that's listening, if you haven't done a live show, which would just be like mind blowing, you're not going to make it if you haven't, but do so. Like, do yourself a favor, even go to a local dive bar, catch a karaoke night if that's your first start, and get your toes wet. Because as we're all agreeing, like some of my highlights of my life, I think could probably fall into this bucket of like concerts and live music.
Yeah, 100% agree. I'm glad to be back and unfrozen, guys. And this feels like a natural time to kind of wrap up here, but it's been a lot of fun. We definitely need to go and hit up some Nashville music. I'm also even super excited. Tom McDonald dropped a new song today that he's been pumping hard. And I think he'd be a cool guy to kind of see live as well. I feel like he's a performer at heart. But anyways, yeah.
I was just going to say, we're seeing some banger tracks. Sorry to cut you off there, Mac, but from Blink 182, Russ, Tom McDonald, today or this week has been a banger. So even aside from the live music, get out there on Spotify, stream some stuff.
Absolutely. And yeah, obviously people can catch your music on Spotify as well, Dan, right?
Absolutely. I'm all over there, Dan the Lost Boy, as well as Project LB52. If you're looking for stuff that's a little more NFT centric. And yeah, it's all there and more coming.
Cool.
If you want to literally be part of the music process, you can with Dan these days through Project LB52.
Let's go.
I think there's also something really fun about that.
Yeah, I think more people need to
hang out with us.
Sorry, I think you lagged there a little, Matt. I was going to say, yeah, great process. If you did need something custom, can kind of hit that out of the park. But I enjoyed kind of coming on the show today, and I don't think it'll be the last time, boys.
Awesome.
All right. Well, appreciate everyone hanging out with us. Smash the like button, hit subscribe if you're new to the channel. Comment on this. Let us know what's one of your most memorable favorite music experiences. And like Dan said, if somehow you've missed out on that, it's definitely worth visiting, regardless of what stage of life you're at.
Awesome. And now we're actually going to play you a song by Dan the Lost Boy. So have a great day, everybody. And we'll see you back here Monday. Well, in fact, I won't see you because I'll be hunting, but Matt will see you and we'll keep the show rolling. So have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.
They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day, no matter what what the weather say. Life is like a record, so just let it play.